This week on The Watchman, we're in Jerusalem for an up-close look at a groundbreaking new archaeological discovery. See what happened after Rome destroyed the Second Temple.
This is the first theater-like structure exposed in Jerusalem after 150 years of archaeological excavations. So if we thought we had excavated everything that could be found, this is a reminder there's always something new.
Plus, we're back at the city of David, ancient Jerusalem, to unlock a fascinating mystery from the time of King David. It's The Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel only on TBN. And welcome to The Watchman from Jerusalem. This is the place that God Almighty says He has chosen for His name to be honored and where King David will rule over Israel. It's the city where God says David and his descendants will always have a lamp before him. Now, there's many more Bible verses like this, and in fact, Jerusalem is mentioned more than 700 times throughout the Bible. It is never mentioned in the Quran, not even once. It seems pretty clear then that Jerusalem is the eternal and undivided capital of Israel and the Jewish people. After all, Jews were living here over 3,000 years ago. Yet much of the world doesn't see it that way. When President Trump declared that the United States would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the U.S. Embassy here, there was outrage. Mahmoud Abbas, European leaders, the UN, much of the world denies Israel's historical claim to Jerusalem. But there's just one problem for these Jerusalem deniers. When you combine the truth of the Bible with irrefutable archaeological and scientific evidence, you have an unbeatable combination. And that's exactly what's happening in this city today. Israeli archaeologists are making incredible discoveries, showing that, yes, the Jewish people were here long before Berlin, London, Paris, and Washington, D.C. ever existed. I recently visited an active archaeological dig at the Western Wall. That's where Joe Uziel of the Israel Antiquities Authority revealed one of the most important new discoveries showing the true history of Jerusalem. Take a look.
Right now we're standing beneath Wilson's Arch, which is a huge stone-built arch which supported a bridge which led from the city into the Temple Mount in the Second Temple period. 2.5 years ago, the Israel Antiquities Authority, together with the Western Wall Heritage Foundation, began the excavations here. And in order to allow the excavations, they had to put in these metal poles behind me to support the synagogue, which is above our head. You hear those chairs dragging?
Yeah, you'll hear some noise up there from the synagogue above us.
That's right. Those are people who are praying now next to the Western Wall, which is right behind me.
The Western Wall.
That's it, right there.
By the way, kind of the big reveal right here, Joe. Wow, people are used to seeing the Western Wall, obviously, the visible outside portion of the Western Wall where people pray. But this also is a part of the Western Wall. And Joe, why is this so important and significant?
Well, the Western Wall where people pray today is actually just a small section which was exposed. This part of the Western Wall hadn't seen light for 1,700 years until we began exposing it. We weren't the first ones to excavate here. Charles Warren digs a small shaft right behind me. And at about this height, he digs another tunnel towards the south. He exposes a small building. We don't know much of what about this building because Warren's areas were very, very small and confined. What he does tell us is that bedrock is another about 7 meters down from where we're standing, and the Western Wall is built all the way down to bedrock. We thought we would find the Second Temple period street, which ran from the city of David, from the Siloam Pool, all the way up to the Temple Mount, and ran along the foot of the Temple Mount, along the foot of the Western Wall. And that's what we thought we would find here. But as often happens in archaeology, we found something completely different. I think if we go down into it, it may blow your mind.
Okay, should we take a walk down?
Yeah.
Joe, okay, lead the way.
Follow me. As I mentioned before, this excavation had a real surprise in store for us. We thought we were going to discover the Second Temple period street, which led from the Siloam Pool and the City of David up to the Temple Mount and ran alongside the foot of the Temple Mount where we're located right now. The street would have been about at eye level for us, and we didn't find the street. What we did find, which suggests that the street did pass here, is the drainage channel right beneath us right here, okay? Right here you have the drainage channel, which would be located beneath the street, and the shop openings on my right, which would have faced the street and would have had services that would have been provided to those walking along the street.
Gotcha, Joe. So the openings we see right there were shops in there.
That's right.
It was a thriving, bustling area when the Temple Mount, obviously, the temple was right above us here. You see the Western Wall here. So this was a real thriving area. It was alive with people, alive with worshipers, I would think, going up to the Temple Mount.
Exactly, up until 70 CE. In 70 CE, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, and much of this road is covered beneath collapse of the Temple Mount, of the buildings alongside the road. However, where we're located, remember, we have Wilson's Arch above our head. Wilson's Arch does not collapse, it stays standing. And so the area was clear. And because the area was clear, the Romans decided that this is a good spot to build one of their Roman buildings, which would be the beginning of the establishment of the Roman colony of Aelia Capitolina, what replaces Jerusalem.
Key point there, Joe. Now, Jerusalem is destroyed, and the Romans rename it. They rename Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina.
That's right. And what they do here is they remove the street, which would have been at this level. They dig down and they put in this circular building that you can see right here. This is the first theater or theater-like structure exposed in Jerusalem after 150 years of archaeological excavations. So if we thought we had excavated everything that could be found, this is a reminder there's always something new.
Yeah, Joe, this is a very exciting discovery, to say the least. And by the way, it's not a Roman amphitheater. Key point there, right? It's a Roman theater.
That's right.
Tell us about the distinction there.
An amphitheater is the full circle, okay? It would have shows like in the Colosseum. Here, this is a theater. A theater would have plays, it would have enactments. The stage area would be to my right over here, and the seats would be going up towards the Western Wall. There's another type of structure called an Odeon. An Odeon is like a theater, but it's smaller, and it has a roof. And the reason it has a roof is because it's used for acoustical performances. Imagine, an MTV Unplugged performance of Lenny Kravitz singing to a small crowd and playing on his acoustic guitar. That kind of thing.
That kind of thing right here.
And that's what would be going on here.
Gotcha. It wasn't a large-scale thing like the Roman Colosseum or a large amphitheater, like you said, Joe. And you can see the two entrances here that you guys have uncovered here.
That's right.
Yeah.
The main
Coming
entrance from the north or the south, and you'd have an usher at the entrance, and you'd show him your ticket, and he'd send you up the right set of stairs in order to get to your seat, which would have been up there towards the wall.
With their backs to the Western Wall and the performer right around this area.
That's right.
Now, this did not go over too well, needless to say, among the Jewish people living in Jerusalem, I would think.
Well, historical sources, particularly Cassius Dio, mentions the fact that the reason for a second revolt, 60 years after the first revolt and after the destruction of Jerusalem, 60 years later, the Jews revolt again against the Romans.
The Bar Kokhba revolt.
The Bar Kokhba revolt. And the reason behind that revolt, according to Cassius Dio, is that the Romans are rebuilding Jerusalem. They're rebuilding Aelia Capitolina, what becomes Aelia Capitolina, and the Jews don't like it very much.
Joe, I can't imagine. Jerusalem is the holy city of the Jewish people, the ancient ancestral capital of Israel and the Jewish people. And for Rome to come in and essentially bulldoze the temple, rename Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina, I can't even imagine how irate the people of Israel were.
Now, an interesting point regarding this building is that we've discovered from various pieces of evidence, and I'll show you one in a minute, that the building was never complete.
Now, Joe, you said that this Roman theater was never actually finished, and here we have some evidence of that, how they stopped construction.
That's right. You can see the efforts taken to build this structure. large stones carved very nicely. And here all of a sudden we have a set of steps leading up to this, leading up to the seats. And take a look here. They never finished carving the step. This is just one of the many indications. Now, to finish carving this step, it's like a couple of hours work.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
It seems like they stopped abruptly.
Exactly, they stop abruptly, and we're trying to think of what the reasons could be that they all of a sudden, one day they get up and they leave and they don't even come back to finish it off. There could be several reasons for this sudden, abrupt stop of building. We know in the Roman world there are cases of buildings that in the middle of construction, the money runs out and they stop building them. One interesting historical option that we're examining is that in the 2nd century CE or AD, the Bar Kokhba revolt erupts. And one of the reasons that we have historically is that the Romans rebuild Jerusalem, begin to rebuild the Jerusalem and putting in Roman structures like we have here. And so is it possible that the structure that we're looking at begins to be built in Jerusalem in the 2nd century AD, and then the Bar Kokhba revolt erupts and they have to leave it unfinished in order to deal with the revolt?
I mean, yeah, because Joe, like you said, it looks like we can kind of shave this off and level it off ourselves right now. Not a long job, but the Bar Kokhba revolt, the years 132 to 135 AD or CE, as you mentioned, it was sparked by things like this, what the Romans were doing in Jerusalem, which they renamed Aelia Capitolina. The Jewish people did not take too kindly to Roman theaters, etc., being built in this renamed Roman city, or what they tried to make it a Roman city.
Exactly. And so basically what we have here may be another one of these indications of the Roman legion building buildings and then having to leave it behind to deal with the revolt. Of course, the Romans succeed in putting down the revolt, but for some reason they don't return to this building. Why that is, we don't know. And again, we're still examining whether that's the exact historic instance that this stops being carved out.
Yeah. What a discovery, what a find. Joe, thanks so much for having us with you here today beneath the Western Wall in the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. Joe, thanks a lot. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Thanks again to Joe Uziel and the amazing team at the Israel Antiquities Authority. Folks, history doesn't lie. Well, coming up after the break, more real history from right here in Jerusalem. We're heading to the city of David to uncover an ancient mystery that involves none other than King David. Don't move.
Last year, 5,000 Christians attended the CUFI Washington, D.C. Summit. The 2017 summit was our most power-packed gathering in history. Top leaders and foreign policy experts from Israel and America agreed on two things. Our two countries are stronger together, and Christians United for Israel plays a major role in keeping that relationship strong.
Through Christians United for Israel, more than 3.3 million believers raised their voices, have not been silent in support of Israel. And you can be heard in every city and town across America and in every office on Capitol Hill. And rest assured, the man down the street at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue hears you too.
That was 2017. Now, get ready for bigger, better things at the 2018 summit as CUFI celebrates Israel at 70. Make sure the world hears your voice. Where will you be in July 2018? Register now.
Welcome back. The city of David is one of my favorite places in all of Israel, and Ze'ev Orenstein is one of my favorite people. He's the Director of International Affairs for the city of David, and he's always got something good for us here at the Watchman. This week he takes us inside an ancient mystery that goes back 3,000 years to the time of King David. Let's go underground with Ze'ev. Well, Ze'ev, we are back here with you in the city of David, ancient Jerusalem, yet again at another amazing place. Where are we standing right now?
We're standing not far from the Gihon Spring, the life source of ancient Jerusalem. And the question is, well, we're in an area that has a number of structures, a number of rooms.
Yeah.
And the big question is, well, when is it from? And the answer is we don't really know. Because what you can see here is you can see the chisel marks cut into the rock. That this area was not actually built. Each room here that we see was carved into the stone behind us. So while we don't know when this area first came into use, what we do know is when it stopped being used. And that is during the time of King Hezekiah, some 2,700 years ago.
Wow. First temple period, Old Testament,
That's
way
right.
back.
Right, mid-First Temple period. And perhaps that understanding will give us a clue into what this area really is.
Wow, and this area, again, was in use close to 3,000 years ago.
That's right, maybe. And perhaps that will also give a clue as to who may have been here and what they were doing here. And just to give a little bit of context, we are on the eastern slope of the city of David, cut into the mountainside of ancient Jerusalem. What do you think this area is?
You know, this is kind of low to the ground, Zev, but I would think that water or something ran down from it, ran down into that channel.
So most likely not water, perhaps blood. Perhaps archaeologists believe that this raised platform here could have been a sacrificial altar. You could imagine some sheep or something laying prostrate over here, and after it's slaughtered by the priest, the blood running off through this channel.
Makes a lot of sense. So wow, the sacrifice right here on the altar.
That's right. And again, the question is, well, how does this fit into the bigger part of where we are?
Yeah, because this is one room among a few rooms,
That's
as
right.
you said, Zev.
So each room is going to provide a little bit of the clues to try and explain where we are.
A very interesting start, mysterious start. Take us to the next room, Zev. Let's go.
The beam here was most likely part of some type of grinding stone that would have gone around the perimeter here, crushing something that would end up collected in the bowl in the center.
Okay.
Most likely we're talking about an olive press.
Olive oil.
That's right. Right? So we have over here olive oil. We came from the sacrificial altar.
Yeah.
Now we know from the Bible, aside from animal sacrifices, there's also oil libations. Right? So two types of sacrificial elements coming together here.
In the same space.
That's right.
Right next to each other.
That's right. Perhaps those two together are beginning to give a certain flavor to what this area may have been used for.
Yeah, Zev, we're starting to get a picture of this nearly 3,000-year-old area from Old Testament times, but this is only the beginning. Let's go to the next room and further unravel this mystery.
That's right.
Let's do it. Coming up, we get closer to solving the ancient mystery. Get ready for a very big reveal. It's the Watchman. It's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN from Jerusalem. The Bible is clear. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob made an everlasting covenant with the land and the people of Israel. They are the apple of his eye. But Israel faces enemies on all sides who want to annihilate every Jewish man, woman, and child.
God gave us a voice and a responsibility, a biblical mandate to bless Israel and to speak up for Zion's sake. Find out how and when you can order my free book, Why Christians Should Support Israel. It will teach you the Bible facts of the power and prosperity of God that comes to you when you read this text.
You'll learn why Israel has a biblical and historic claim to the land. Call Christians United for Israel at the number on your screen or go to CUFI.org/book and we'll send you your free book from Pastor John Hagee. If you won't speak up for Israel, who will? Well, Zev, we saw where the olive oil was made. We saw what was likely an altar where animals were sacrificed nearly 3,000 years ago. But now in this third room, the mystery really deepens. Tell us about where we are right now.
So the way it works in archaeology is when you find something that just doesn't seem to make sense, you say, where have we seen this before. And you say, well, what was it used for there? Maybe it can shed some light onto what it is used for here. The problem is, what we have in this room here hasn't been seen before. When archaeologists discovered this a couple of years ago, we post pictures of this online and tens of thousands of responses come in. The number one answer was supernatural, Stonehenge, crop circles.
Exactly.
But let's kind of leave that for the sci-fi, right? What are these markings? Perhaps, maybe some type of table would have stood here, the legs would have gone into the grooves. Behind you, there is a circle, a ring, where perhaps an animal would have been tied up, that maybe after the animal was sacrificed, they put it up on some type of rack over here, maybe skinned it, who knows.
Makes sense. Look, the altar was right next door, Zev, that room where the animals were sacrificed that we just saw.
That's right. So this likely somehow fits into the story of the bigger purpose of this area.
It's a mystery, as you said, Zev, but in our next and final room, we're kind of going to tie it all together, right?
That's right.
Lead the way, my friend.
Let's go. What we have over here, we came from the olive press room. We came from the sacrificial altar. But there's another kind of altar. An altar that is not used with animals, but is used for another kind of worship. And that's what we're going to see over here. What we have over here is what you would call in Hebrew a matzeva, or a prayer altar. We know that the Bible tells us, we're talking about the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel, David conquers Jerusalem. And he's now living comfortably in his capital city. And he says, wait a minute, how could it be that I'm living in a house of stone? And yet God's presence, the Ark of the Covenant, which he had brought up to Jerusalem with him, how could it be that God, his presence, is living in a house of cloth, a tent? And he says, I want to build the temple for God on the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah. But God comes to him and says, David, I appreciate the thought. I'm touched. But you will not be the one who will build it, but your son Solomon. He will be the one. I will have an everlasting covenant with you. And now, David, what is he going to do? In the meantime, he's not going to be the one to build the temple. But in the meantime, you have the Ark of the Covenant. What are you going to do with it? Perhaps, archaeologists believe, perhaps, this whole area where we're standing right now, this became the ritual worship area for King David himself.
King David's private prayer space.
That's right. The olive oil for the oil libations, the animal sacrifices on the altar, and here we have this prayer altar over here. And perhaps somewhere in this vicinity of where we're standing, perhaps was the Ark of the Covenant until it was moved into the temple itself.
When King David used this prayer altar, this was before that biblical mandate that you must be at the temple.
Right, there was no temple yet.
Right. So King David was in accordance with God and with the law.
That's right. And so now Hezekiah, he has this dilemma. We got to get rid of all the private worship, but on the other hand, if this was King David's prayer area, his worship area, I don't want to be the one to destroy it. And so what does he do? He finds that perhaps Solomonic wisdom, the balance in the middle, and he says, you know what? I'm not going to destroy it, but I'm going to ensure that nobody ever uses it ever again. Covers it up, buries it under tons and tons of earth. Then archaeologists understand this stopped being used during the time of King Hezekiah. So we are standing in the place where this could very well have been, some 3,000 years ago, the very ritual worship area of King David himself.
And Zev, to think that King David, this might have been the spot where God Almighty laid some of those beautiful Psalms on his heart, on his mind. David put them onto paper for all of us to draw from today. Amazing. Zev, thank you so much. It was great.
My pleasure.
Thanks again to Zev Orenstein and the City of David for that very big reveal. Be sure to visit the City of David the next time you're here in Jerusalem, and you do need to come. Well, up next, my final thoughts on why this city matters to you. Stick around.
With over 3.5 million members, Christians United for Israel is the largest pro-Israel organization in America. And for Zion's sake, we will not remain silent. We won't stand for the lies and political attacks that threaten Israel's safety and the future of the Jewish people in their God-given homeland. We want you to join us in this sacred movement.
The Jewish people are not alone. Christians United for Israel, I want to thank you for standing up for Israel. I want to thank you for standing up and being counted. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Israel needs you to take a stand. Join Christians United for Israel. Make your voice heard and be remembered as a defender of Israel, the apple of God's eye.
And welcome back to the Watchman from Jerusalem. Our team at Christians United for Israel has a few foundational Bible verses. You can find one of the most important ones on our logo. It's from the book of Isaiah, chapter 62, verse 1, and it says, "For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not keep quiet, until her righteousness shines out like the dawn, and her salvation like a blazing torch." Now, there's many hot spots in the world today, but God is very clear that in His eyes, all roads lead to Jerusalem. Our team at CUFI understands the importance of Jerusalem in God's plan, and we want you to join us. You see the information there on your screen, so join our movement of close to 4 million followers of Jesus as we stand for Israel, for Zion, for such a time as this. Well, thanks for joining us this week on The Watchman. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.